Okay. So yeah, let's get started. What are you guys feeling about this conflict? Let's just start there. What are you guys feeling or thinking about in the last 2 weeks in regards to the Ukraine and Russia war?
A disclaimer: I'm living in Russia right now.
Okay.
Okay, uh, and I'm an Indian. I have been living here for last 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
That is just a disclaimer, and just to let you know that I'm very much uh, kind of exposed to that could be called Russian propaganda. Now, that being said, I am very much open to go to YouTube and other channels so that I can have the better perspective of any issue that is running current. So, as per my understanding of it, uh, Ukraine has been played by Western or NATO mainly, which is being led by America to get into this confrontation with Russia, and now it has been abandoned, as per my understanding. And whatever the Americans are saying or Westerners are saying that they are going to provide, it is going to be Ukraine and Russia that is going to pay for it. Nobody else in the current situation, as Ukraine is not a part of NATO, so nobody is going to get involved directly. Apart from that, I'm really very much touched by the plight that Ukrainians are going through right now. Civilians, all those people, volunteers, even volunteers who are ready to take up the arms, I feel bad for them. I personally feel bad for them because as I told you earlier, that I have a 2.5 years old kid. When I see these people, I feel bad for them, and that is why your this meetup interests me because I feel that I'm getting too emotional with the things, and Stoicism tells you not to be too involved with anything emotionally. Just balance yourself. Maybe I'm wrong. I have just superficial knowledge about this Stoicism. I have seen just 3 or 4 videos. I have never read any book about Stoicism. I don't know the Greek philosophers who were talking about Stoicism. Maybe one or two in the video they must have mentioned, but other than that, I have no understanding of it. And that is why in those questionnaires that you take for people to sign up for this meetup, sorry for that. I mentioned that I am here to learn. So that is from my end.
By the way, first, I'd like to start off by saying, I see Gonzalo's hand. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for joining us from Russia. I don't know what it's like there, but are you comfortable being online right now at this kind of meetup? Just
Yeah,
okay.
I am not feeling any kind of um, like I'm not scared, to be honest,
Okay.
because I'm not talking anything bad about anyone.
Okay. No, but thank you for joining us. It's really also great that you're here. I'm actually really happy, excited about this discussion because to have your perspective from somebody living in Russia would be fantastic because we don't get that here. Like we don't hear Russians' voices, so it'd be really, really interesting to hear what you have to say.
I'm still not a Russian. I still hold an Indian passport.
Oh, okay. But you're a resident, so
Yeah.
it would be interesting to get your perspective. So first of all, it's just really important to mention that Stoicism. So I don't know how much you've heard and what your interpretation is. Stoics don't advise to purge your emotions, right? They don't want you to completely eliminate your emotions, whatever, and never feel anything. They simply, like you said, they simply want you to balance yourself. They simply want you to, when you do feel an emotion, kind of recenter yourself and redirect that emotion somewhere else. That emotion is, if it's maybe too strong, like excessive fear or anger, you're going to feel it in the very beginning, even the Stoic sages do, but after you feel it, kind of judge the situation dispassionately, try to understand what's going on reasonably, and that should help you in the end realize that there's really nothing to be afraid of except the feeling of fear itself. But there are some emotions that are okay. I mean, the Stoics were okay with feeling joy in certain circumstances, like when you're around your family. So the Stoics were not emotional. They just wanted you to do it. Like you said, balance yourself. I'm going to turn it over. I wanted to say something about the war, but maybe just to hear your thoughts first. Gonzalo, you wanted to respond.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, I think that all of us are here to learn either different perspective or different aspects of what our thoughts mean or feel. So again, as Steve mentioned, thank you very much for joining. I think it's a really a good point of view to have. I also agree heavily the fact that either kind of like only Russia and Ukraine probably will be the ones having the highest burden, no, how is it called? Burden of the results of this economical situation and political situation. But I actually don't think that there's like any other solution. I was trying to figure out a way of understanding this, and I was like, okay, so we have 200 people in the room, 4 of them are fighting, and the rest of us is just waiting there to see what happens. Because we don't want to do anything in order to kind of like create more problems that we are solving. But I also feel like those things are not working. And we continue to do things that we are not 100% sure if they will de-escalate the situation into like conversational, or if we just continue into the violence path.
Yeah, I've also been very confused. I agree with both of you that it's you want to. I mean, because when war breaks out, and then most of the world understands that this is an invasion and says, okay, we have to help this country. It's a really delicate situation, because the first instinct I had was let's go in with the military. Let's defend Ukraine. But then after a while, I started realizing that would really, really be a messed up situation. I mean, that would escalate into world war. We don't want to do that. And so what do you do? If you can't help directly, what do you do? And it's also been, on the optimistic side, it's been pretty amazing the way we can help the situation without actually directly being there. Like, my school is organizing donations to Ukrainian refugees and Ukraine itself, like medical supplies, clothing. Like, it's amazing the effort that and the solidarity I've seen throughout Europe. I mean, of course, this is a terrible situation. There's no optimistic outlook whatsoever. But I'm just optimistic in regards to just too many individuals in some cases. Some cases they actually turn away volunteers. Here in Berlin as well, as I'm hearing it, and the main train station taking in refugees, they're turning away volunteers now because they just have too many people signing up to help give people rooms if they need it. So in that regard, I think there's a silver lining to this. Nothing we can expect from the future, but what we can see now is that if any conflict arises, like I'm pretty secure knowing that if there's another conflict in the future after the war with Ukraine, and with humans, there's always going to be conflict, right? This is going to happen for a long time. I'm pretty confident that whenever the next big conflict arises in the world, that we can rely on people around the world to kind of feel solidarity with each other again, and to maybe plan big donations and so forth. So, but yeah, I feel anxious. Besides that, what can you do? And we don't want to escalate the conflict. This is before I pass it on to Gonzalo. This is a common Stoic problem where you want to act as just and as wise as possible. But sometimes you can only act based on the limited information you have. And if you don't have enough information, we can't predict the future. If NATO invades Ukraine to defend Ukraine, we can't predict what happens. So at this point, it's, we're using our best judgment to say, let's wait to see what happens and hope for the best for Ukraine. Yeah, Gonzalo.
For me, it was kind of like really interesting to see the discriminatory discourse starting again in a really creepy way. Kind of like this whole discourse about this is not Syria, this is Europe, and welcome to our refugees. I felt that attitude towards these particular refugees very deeply. It's like we could have done the same thing for everyone, but I don't know. It felt really racist in a way. To the discourse mainly. I think that kind of like the way that people refer to things felt really, really discriminatory against kind of like the rest of the world. I felt it like, we are okay with Europeans, but the rest of the world, we don't accept any refugees from the rest of the world. Even though that sometimes is not completely true. I mean, for Germany, for example, Germany is doing a very good job at having refugees and welcoming them. But also, I think it's really good that, for example, in Hauptbahnhof, in my house, all the support that is coming through is people organized. That's not a private thing. Kind of like the people started and said, okay, these are the things that we need. This is how we are going to help. And then like more and more private companies started to join and to do a little bit of donations and so on. I mean, I felt that aspect that you mentioned, Steve, kind of like that positivism, that nice energy about faith in humanity restored, about seeing this sort of
We lost you for
small
a second.
things. Yeah.
What was the last thing you said, Gonzalo? We lost you for a second.
Yeah. I said that I felt really inspired by that sort of energy, like faith in humanity restored. But on the other hand, I was like, not quite there yet, because we still have this racist discourse about, yeah. I lost you again, right?
No, you have us. I'm sorry, I realized I've never caught your name. I see your hand up, but
Vikrant. Vikrant. You may call me Rao.
Raoul. Okay, Raoul.
That would be easy for you to pronounce. I wanted to make 2 points. First of all, that whether it is country to country relationship or human to human relationship, you just need to smile to maintain the relationship. You just need to smile. But most of the people are ready to cry when relationship is about to break up. They don't care about smiling and maintaining the relationship. They don't care to even hear what other person is saying. Just acknowledge the presence of other person. It happens most of the time. Now, in regards with Ukraine, Russia was saying about these things for like 20 years, 30 years. Nobody cared about it. They were calling it as bluff. And now Ukraine is paying the price of that. Humans are paying price for that. The entire world is going to pay a price for that. Second, refugees. Why Europe has to take all the refugees? Why cannot we have peace where people can stay where they want to stay and where they were born? Why can't they have just peaceful life where they were born? Why? I'm not saying that. See, at a personal level, I can invite 5 people. They can stay at my home. I can invite 6 people. They can stay at my home for 6 days, 7 days, 10 days. There would be a limit to that. My resources would be uh, used up. Then I have to throw them out. I have to be stringent with them so that resources can be utilized optimally. I have to say someone else not to come in just because I have to feed properly those people. But still, I would be back to that one person who has came to my door with a hope. Why do we have to be? Why the world has to be this way? That was my point.
No, I think we feel you. So I think I see Adi and then Gonzalo, but just to transition, no. It's also good to remind ourselves that sometimes solidarity is not enough now in the present. Like you said, like we should have had this kind of help for the last 3 decades, right? Like since they call it the Budapest Memorandum, right? When the 4 countries had signed this memorandum to never invade Ukraine and to never proliferate nuclear weapons. All of a sudden, the U.S. and Russia never did that. The U.S. is also a culprit, right? The U.S. still has nuclear weapons. They never went down to 0. And you're right, NATO never took seriously Russia's threats. Even the weeks leading up to the invasion, it was hard for them to, especially the European statesmen, it was very hard to swallow. Yeah, I feel it. Adi? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I think this is regarding the previous speaker, like as they pointed out that why there is a difference. I mean, it's like from an outsider perspective, I can see there is definitely a difference when if the way you interact with people when they can speak the common language, I mean, the interaction will be definitely different than if you speak a different language. So in that sense, I mean, Poland has accepted Ukrainians open. They welcomed a lot, whereas they did not for other people, because I think culturally they feel they have a sense of that they know these people at least in some sense. But whereas previously they did not felt that way. So I mean, I think there is it doesn't justify what they have done. It's understanding of the situation when playing host to someone who you have no idea about and playing a host to someone who you kind of understand, or to, like, if you make a party, you always invite people you know, and also the ones with you whom you have a commonality. I don't think you would like to host a birthday party with let's say RFT people. I'm just randomly saying it. I mean, no one does it. At least no one tells it to me. So I think there is that aspect to it. That the reason why there has been difference, and also it's also very. I mean, it's affecting them, right? It's a crisis right next to your door. It's not like a bit far away land where you can say, I can ignore. I mean, in that sense, the same day when Russia invaded Ukraine, there were bombs dropped in Eritrea. There were bombs dropped in several places. It's not that that was the only spot where things were happening. But if I'm in Poland, I would consider what is happening in Ukraine as the most important thing for me, because it's happening next to my door. So I think it depends on vicinity where you are. I don't know what is happening in South America now. I mean, things, or even in Africa, like. So I think it's. I mean, I don't see that argument of like, why did not do it. I mean, it's not a great thing. I would have welcomed the same approach, but I don't also expect the same approach every time, frankly, because it definitely depends on the situation to situation. Like, so I think that was just, and I'm also a bit. I don't understand how this situation will turn out. I mean, if Ukraine wins, what happens? Like, will Russia back down? I'm actually, even as a game theory way, I don't see actually a clear way. I mean, maybe if someone can throw lights on what scenarios I mean, it's actually very confusing, and it sounds very much similar to the not the second war, but the first war. Like a small thing happened in Balkan, and it blew into all. Yeah. So yeah, that's it.
No, thank you, Adi. No, but yeah, it's. I think evolutionarily, naturally, it is very natural for humans, right, to geographically say that person is closer to me. I'm going to care about him more than somebody 2,000 kilometers away. So just naturally, that of course we're going to have the tendency to do that often, to help those who are closer to us than those who are further away. But I do think that the Stoics. So again, because we keep coming back to the Stoics as a lens through which we can see the situation. The Stoics and the Greek philosophers in general, but specifically the Stoics, were the ones to invent the term cosmopolitan. They were the ones to kind of invent this idea of a human, a human citizen of the world, not a citizen of any particular nation or locality, but a citizen of the globe. And I think it's, where we are right now as humans is caring about one particular location because it's closer to us. But we should be striving all the time to be more cosmopolitan. Like it also got me thinking weeks ago, the same thing. I've had the same thought, like, why the hell didn't I care this much about other conflicts in Eritrea or Kashmir or Palestine? I mean, you can name plenty of them. And I think the reason is proximity. It's closer to me, Ukraine. So I know I have to do a better job of donating and helping and doing my research on other conflicts in the world than just the one closer to my locality. Gonzalo, I know you have your hand up, but we haven't heard from Adrian. So I was going to go over to him. Yeah, Adrian. Hi. Oh, you're on mute. We can't hear you. It says you're not muted here, but I think we still can't hear you, so it might be the mute on your computer.
Meanwhile, may I ask you guys? I didn't want to raise my hand. I don't know how to bring it down.
I think you have to click the button to raise your hand, and then as soon as you start speaking, I think that's when your hand is down raised.
I don't know. I'm just getting out of the room, and I cannot get back in without having two raised hands.
Oh, okay. It's okay if
are you on mobile?
Wait, Adrian, can you say something again? No, we can't hear you.
I think we can't hear him. Yeah.
Maybe try taking out your earphones. I don't know if that. Yeah. I don't know.
Wait, now does it?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So but quickly on that,
you can still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. If you
so sorry, quickly, can I add a comment to this? So
wait, no. Can we go to Adrian for a second?
Okay, sorry.
We've been waiting for him. Sorry.
Can you still hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, this is awesome. So I'm a big admirer of the Stoic philosophy, and I mean, I know the topic is war. There's a war in Ukraine at the moment, for sure. I'm curious from a Stoic point of view. One of the tenets of the Stoic philosophy is know what you can control, know what you cannot control. None of the people here in this meeting have anything to do causality-wise with the situation there, like obviously. But how do you think we should feel about it? What do you think we should do about it? What can we do about it? And maybe if somebody wants to share about this topic, I am very curious from a Stoic point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Adrian. Also, I really like that you brought up this Stoic concept. For anybody who doesn't know, this is modern terminology, but the way philosophers define this principle of Stoicism is called the dichotomy of control. So on one side, you have events that are within your control or within your sphere of influence. Usually those are internal things like thoughts, beliefs, ideas, or actions, decision-making. And on the other side, right, this dichotomy, so the other side are things you can't control. External things usually, like I can water my plant as much as I want, but someday it's going to die and I can't do anything about it, right? So, your control has limits. And Stoics, yeah, and you're right, Adrian. When you look at this war, you need to keep in mind what you can't control, because if you're frustrated and you're angry, and it's okay to be angry, right? We understand to be pissed off at the situation, to vent our emotions, but then the Stoics say, okay, now that you got that out of your system, look at this situation appropriately. It's unlikely that we're going to be going to drive our cars into Kiev and join the war effort. And I even just saw the other day, they're not taking more volunteers from their citizens because they just have so many volunteers. So we wouldn't even be able to join the military if we wanted, right? So that's out of the question. We can't stop Putin, right? We can't just tell him no. So we can't do that, right? And we probably shouldn't be starting a world war because unlike the last World War, we have nuclear weapons at the very beginning. So we definitely shouldn't want to start a world war. So it's like, that's all out of our control. As much as we hate that fact, as much as we hate it, that's out of our control. But what can we do? Well, donations. There have been people driving from Berlin all the way through Poland to the border with Ukraine to help any refugees coming out. That's one thing you can do, right? You can maybe use your own car or donate to the people in the organization driving over to the border to help out. What can else you do? You can demonstrate. It's hard, right? Because maybe a lot of people also gave me this idea that, protests and demonstrations about this are not really going to do much good, right? They're not going to stop Putin from invading Ukraine. All that we can hope the protest would do, for example, is maybe get our leaders to provide more aid to Ukraine, more humanitarian aid, right? So that's the best we can do. And that's what the Stoics want you to know. They want you to know that there are always going to be some things within your control, some element of a situation which you can influence, and you have to deal with that. You have to just settle for that. You can push your limits, of course. You can do the best you can, but those are always a limit to what you can do, and that's what the Stoics want you to understand. And they want you to forgive yourself. They don't want you to feel like you're guilty or responsible when you couldn't do anything about it in the first place. So they also want you to forgive yourself and say, listen, it's okay to not be able to do everything because that's out of your control. The best you can do is, are you giving people a place to stay while they need it? Are you donating food and water and medical supplies? And if that's what you're doing and you're doing the best you can, that's perfectly fine because you're doing what's within your control.
I would like to add, if it's my turn.
Yeah, you can add something, and
taking somebody else's turn. I have this quote on my desk. I think it's Marcus Aurelius. So I understand the situation. I accept the situation. I incorporate the situation into my plans. So more than this, more than what you said, what we can do, I know it's small things, but we can make a personal opinion on how things are going to continue. What's the finality of the situation? And I'm thinking two things that are in my brain in the last few days. A third, maybe that was fake news, but a third of the grain imported in Europe is produced in Ukraine. So the price of grain will grow in the next year because now there are no tractors planting grain and doing farm work. I'm assuming, like a lot of land is being not cultivated due to this situation. So food will grow, the prices will grow for food a little bit. Secondly, this is a country with 40 million people, so a large country. I'm not sure exactly how many people. It's being ravaged by the destruction, the explosions, like buildings are being destroyed, factories, mills, and the infrastructure is getting damaged. These people, what is likely for years, will have to rebuild the country and will have poverty. The country will be poorer than it was 2 weeks ago. And I'm thinking for years there will be some people who want to come to West Europe, simply because of the poverty situation, no jobs and whatever. I mean, this destruction will have a long-term impact. And these two things, some prices going up and some more people coming, and they will be in need of housing and jobs and food and all that stuff. This is pretty immediate to everyone in Europe. Like, this is affecting kind of everyone. You can be in another country, and yeah. I'm curious what everybody else thinks about these topics. Thank you for listening. Yeah.
Thank you, Adrian. No, great point. And great points you made. So I lost track of hands, but I think the two hands that have been up are Adi and Gonzalo. So we're going to go back to Gonzalo and then Adi, just because I think the most recent person who spoke was Adi. So
Please ignore my hand for a while. Ignore mine.
we don't see your hand. Your hand is not raised. You're fine.
It is showing me that I have raised twice.
Yeah, Gonzalo.
From my perspective, I think that one of the things that you said was slightly alarming for me. Nobody can tell you how or what to feel. The idea is about to understand yourself first and try to kind of like put a pause to our reactions. That's kind of like the basic, really core idea about Stoicism from my perspective. Kind of like feel your emotions correctly and then choose the appropriate reaction to do. That's the first one. And also, I don't want to sound a little bit rude, but there's also an option of not doing anything if you cannot do something. Kind of like we are assuming that people will have energy to do things, but sometimes that's not the reality. Maybe you're already struggling with mental health, with your own reality. Maybe you have 2 jobs. Maybe you have a bunch of things going on through your mind that right now doesn't allow you to either protest or to make sandwiches or be a volunteer. There are a bunch of things that kind of like assume that you have the ability to do more things than what you're actually doing today. And that's, for me, it's something that needs to be reconsidered. There's an option of not doing anything because you are already over the top with the things that that happened before this situation that we are in. I do want to remind that there's an option of, if you're struggling, that it's like, yeah, it's a shitty situation, but I cannot do anything because I feel overwhelmed. I cannot process this thing correctly. And that's perfectly fine also. There was something else, but I forget, so I will pass on.
Yeah, it's been a while since you raised your hand. That's okay. Yeah, but yeah, just as we pass on to Adi, remember, Raoul, you made a very good point in the very, very beginning, and I think that connects back to this, is that in the end of the day, why are they refugees in the first place? These people just want to live their lives, and why can't they be a refugee in their own home? So it's we all have our own homes and our own lives to take care of. Sometimes we have to be understanding of ourselves, that we can't commit to every cause out there. Adi, go ahead.
Yeah, so this was just on the point what Adrian has mentioned, actually, which is very important, is actually Ukraine-Russian war has made, now there is a huge food crisis in a lot of northeast of East Africa already and Middle East actually, because more than 60% of the wheat is actually from Ukraine and Russian imports. So because of this one, they already are in the crisis. Food crisis is already like happening here heavily. So it's not like we will see it. It's already happening currently with the whole situation. It's I think it's actually one of the most important effects. So it's not just only Europe facing the thing. It's like even with the oil exports affecting, I think it's going to be a lot of other countries getting affected soon.
Thank you for mentioning that. Also, yeah, both of you and both you and Adrian have mentioned the wheat crisis. I didn't realize that. I haven't read that about that yet. Most of these news aggregator apps, which are great, they take from a variety. I have a subscription. I have a variety, so they take from a variety of international newspapers, and I get a collection of articles every day. But sometimes they don't select one of these news pieces about a certain item that's important, and that's actually, I'm going to start. Thank you for sharing that article, by the way, Adi. I'm going to start reading that today. Gonzalo.
Yes, that reminds me to the other thing. I actually think that this is part of the strategy because the world produces a huge amount of food for a part of, let's say, people that are not there yet. We produce and we throw away a lot of food. So I don't think that food is the problem. The problem is usually distribution of the goods. I think that in some cases, Ukraine is closer and in the middle, so it may be easier to distribute food from Ukraine. But I don't think that food is the problem. The world has had overgrowth of food since a really long time. I think that the only people that are in trouble are kind of like Europeans with gas problems, and also the battery, because Russia is I think the second biggest producer of cadmium in the world, and we have most of the technologies using that. I think it's just a strategy in order to say, the world depends on me, so I can get by all of these creepy things. Using a very specific strategy of kind of like creating all this doubt so that people somehow believe this thing. I'm not really sure that kind of like the only crisis that I really believe in is the electronic crisis and cadmium batteries. Those things, the minute that the world started, I think it has... I think the price has risen 6 times now. So batteries are going to be really expensive, and we need batteries for everything. But yeah, I just think that the rest of it is propaganda. Sorry.
No, the wheat thing is it's
the food. At least the food crisis, from my perspective, is kind of like some sort of kind of like a scare tactic in order to create some sort of situation where people feel that they need to not punish Russia because.
No,
so I think that
it's not Russia, it's Ukrainian one. Anyway, sorry.
Are you? Yeah, it's not Russia, it's Ukraine, Gonzalo. The article he shared, the wheat imports that they're worried about is from Ukraine, not Russia. Apparently, Russia and Ukraine together supply a quarter of the world's wheat exports, and they're specifically seeing a cut down in wheat imports from Ukraine. So they're not feeling it from Russia; they're feeling it from Ukraine. And they were reporting from on the ground in Egypt and Tunisia. So I have to very disagree with that. I don't think, first of all, I don't think we could speculate what's going to happen in the next months. But I think there is a real concern that if the conflict doesn't get situated in Ukraine, then of course it's geopolitical. We can't know Ukraine, Russia is going to occupy and so on and so forth. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the long run. But as long as there's conflict, the farmers can't do their jobs and there's not going to be anything harvested. I mean, not anything, but I don't know. I do feel there's a concern for that. But
it's true, Russia also exports huge amounts, but I mean, right now, whoever exports it, but because of the conflict, there is effects not just on Europe. Middle East is also affected by it, so it's a rippling effect.
No, wait. I'm not saying that there will not be any consequences. The only thing that I'm saying is that kind of like there's enough food for everyone. We just need to figure out a way for bringing it from places like Latin America, that it's producing a huge ton amount of food, and distribute it to the correct places. Like, I feel like the problem is about making things easier. Kind of like Ukraine is in the middle of everything. So probably it's easier to transport food from there than from Latin America, for example, because you have to cross the whole Atlantic Ocean, right? That's the only thing that I'm saying. Kind of like, I will not worry about food, we'll worry about other things.
I thought I saw a hand up. Raoul, you turn your mic off? Yeah.
Just wanted to add that Ukraine and Russia are the biggest exporters of wheat and sunflower. So you can expect crisis in food, because flour is being used to prepare bread. So
I'm also,
that was my point.
Yeah. No, this is a good point. It's also a good statement to make. It'll inform countries what to expect down the road in terms of imports and exports. Because even if the people don't get into a scare, the importers are definitely going to get spooked and might raise prices. So it is a concern for the people on the ground. I think my mind exited the perspective of a Stoic, and then Gonzalo brought it back. I think Gonzalo is not so much speaking from, and I wasn't even thinking through this lens, but Gonzalo wasn't speaking from a reality of there are no real consequences. Like, there won't be a reduction in wheat exports. There might be a reduction in wheat exports. There might be an increase in price. But I think where he's coming from is that as a Stoic, you can't, as an individual, do anything, right? To get so upset or angry or fearful about the situation as to go into a panic and a scare over too little wheat is out of your control, a Stoic would say. It's something that you can't directly control, and it sucks that you can't do that. You want to go over there and start planting the wheat yourself and harvesting it, but you can't. And that's the problem that Stoicism tries to solve, is what do you do about a situation you have no control over? And it's be disaffected by it. Just understand that there's nothing you can do to change it, and change your diet. If it's adapt. In this case, if your diet relies heavily on wheat, whether that's bread, that's beer, or that's literally half the stuff most people have in their households, it's, you have to find a solution, substitute for more vegetables. So of course, I was having a discussion with somebody else the other day, and I was complaining to him that Stoicism can't be scaled up, can't be used to solve societal problems. It breaks down. And he was like, well, that's the point. Stoicism was not invented as a philosophy to address social or global problems. It was a philosophy to address how do you feel about those problems in the world, and how do you react to them, and how do you decide your actions in response to the problems in the world. So I think we have to keep in mind that as much as there might be a wheat deficit, for one, we can change our diet or change the way we buy food. Or two, maybe we can petition governments, wherever locally you're living in. We can petition our local governments to say, hey, if there's some arable land for wheat, maybe we can substitute some of the crops we're already growing with for some wheat. So we have to adapt if this is a long-term problem, or we're just focusing on what we do as individuals. Adi.
Sorry, actually, I have a curious question which pointed out. So how does the philosophical way of punishment work? Like we said, let's say tomorrow I hope the war ends. So how do you see that that you impose a condition in such a way that these things don't happen again? And how do you make sure that this thing doesn't repeat? I mean, the Treaty of Versailles kind of thing will definitely not help, I guess. But how does this kind of thing can be addressed philosophically? I mean, I know it won't be a realistic way, but still.
Are you specifically talking about treaties or diplomatic solutions, or just the war in general?
Yeah, in war in general, yeah.
My answer to that would be it depends on the philosophy through which you're understanding the situation. Because even for the ancient Greeks, even for the Hellenistic philosophies like Epicureanism, Stoicism, Cynicism, the Peripatetics, right, the Aristotelians, or even the Plato's Academy, there were even some smaller schools like the I forget their name. They were a school of the magicians. They were a school of logical philosophers of logic. But it depends on the school, because every school had a way to address the problem of how do you live well and how do you live nobly and correctly. So it really depends. A Stoic philosopher, foundationally, a Stoic philosopher always seeks to embody the best of characters. So they seek to achieve four things, which are the four cardinal virtues for the Stoic philosophers. They seek to be as wise as possible, as just, meaning as fairly to other people as possible. They try to be as courageous as possible through times of war, but also non-physical things like times of stress. They also try to be as temperate or moderate as possible in maybe not abusing a drug, or making sure you don't eat so much, or making sure you don't overwork yourself, right? They try to moderate things that in excess could be dangerous to you. So the Stoic philosopher would say how to address this problem. Well, first and foremost, you can't do anything to push society along, but you're like an atom in society. You're like an atom in a sea of water. You can, as more and more people act the best that they can, even if they're not a Stoic, they act as wisely, as justly to other people, as temperately, and as courageously. They're going to get through this situation. I mean, we can't guarantee that, right? We can't dictate fate and say that as long as we act nobly and virtuously, the world will be saved, and the conflict will go away very, very shortly. We have to maybe deal with the probable future that this conflict prolongs for the next few years, even longer. Like maybe we can't speculate, and we still have to act the best we can through it all. And that's what Stoicism teaches you. The Stoic philosopher would say, you can't predict the solution, and you shouldn't rely on your expectations for what the solution should be, or what should it look like, because you don't know that. But what you do know is what's within your power. Again, it all comes back to the central principle, is what is within your power. And the first thing before anything else that's within your power is your character, how you act in society. And just think about if everybody thought like that, the world might be a better place. You don't even have to be a Stoic to believe that certain basic human values and principles should be fundamental to the way we act. And Stoicism thought that. They thought that the chief way to achieve eudaimonia, or happiness or fulfillment in your life, was to act nobly in character. So that was their solution. I'll give you a brief version of the others. The Epicureans actually receded from society. The Epicureans were the ones to think the least amount of pain, the better. Therefore, if there's some conflict or public sphere, please recede from it, go meditate out in the garden, and don't go back. The Cynics, who were the forebears, the antecedents to the Stoics, they didn't think any organization was necessary. They basically lived homeless voluntarily, living in rags and living off of wells, and living off of people's donations, because they thought that you needed to be as minimalist and closest to nature as possible. So the various philosophies had very different ways of understanding how to achieve happiness and fulfillment in your life. And the reason why I prefer Stoicism is because it wants you to actively engage in the public sphere. Because otherwise, if you don't engage in the public sphere, how will you ever know you're of good character, right? If you sit alone in a room for years on end, you're never going to know if you're a good person, because the only person you've ever had to be good to is yourself. So the Stoics were the ones to say, no, you need to go out in society and practice your character, because that's the way you know you can be a good person. So yeah, but it depends on your philosophy. Anybody else? I know we just lost Gonzalo. He said he had to go. And Gonzalo is a regular member of the Berlin Stoics. But does anybody else have another comment? Yeah, Raoul.
My hand has been raised.
No, you turned your mic on.
No, I'm sorry, because I'm getting kicked off from it whenever I press the back button, and I have to rejoin it, and that's why my mic is turns off.
Okay.
But my question, was, as you were pointing out the traits of Stoicism, that you need to be wise. The first trait that you mentioned.
Yeah. What's your question?
So when you are going for wisdom, do you have to have good perspective of both the parties, that whether the conflicting parties, in my view?
Yeah. So wisdom to the Stoics. So the way, there's various definitions depending on the book you read or the article you read. It has various definitions of what the Greeks thought of as wisdom, because their word for wisdom, linguistically, the word for wisdom is very, very closely related to knowledge. But they had more than just one word for knowledge. They had various words for knowledge and wisdom, for different types of wisdom. And the word for wisdom the Stoics used was specifically related to knowing the difference between what is most virtuous, the most virtuous action to take and decision to make, and what's the most unvirtuous action or decision to make. The difference between what's right and wrong, right? But for the Stoic, that meant what's the most cosmopolitan, just to other people, courageous, and moderate. And for the Stoics, you can't be one without the other. To be wise, I forget your question now.
To get to a wise decision, you need to have the proper knowledge about
okay.
So you have to understand the perspective of both the conflicting parties. If there is a conflict, then only you can be wise to make a decision. But if you are just listening to one thing, you can never be wise. You are biased at that point of time.
Yeah, I think a Stoic would say yes. I think a Stoic would say, because Seneca writes a lot about this in his discourses and his essays and his letters. So Seneca often discusses the fact that you can't know everything. He was a political advisor also to the emperor, so he knew quite well how in certain situations you have to act or decide on something based on very limited information, or not act. Right? Gonzalo made the point that you could decide not to act based on certain limited information. If it's too limited, right? But the Stoic would tell you, they wouldn't tell you not to pursue further knowledge and information just because you're limited right now, right? So a Stoic, I think, would say yes. If given in, like, let's say you had the power to bring Ukrainian and Russian representatives to the table and hear both their complaints, then use that. If it's within your control or sphere of influence, then go ahead. So the Stoic would say, yeah, if it's within your power to do it, hear both sides of the story and then try and be the best diplomat you can. If it's not within your power and they don't want to talk right now, okay, you can't do anything, but then try again later and then maybe it works out. Yeah. Yeah, a Stoic would, yeah, it's also not for any non-Stoic. I think we can't also just focus on the fact that Ukraine's having problems. As much as Russia should have never invaded Ukraine, and Russia is the clear aggressor here. They're the clear party in this conflict that is aggressing against another country, and that's shameful. That being said, you can't also dismiss some of their complaints before they invaded Ukraine. For weeks, they were saying, we don't like the fact that over the past 2 decades, and NATO wasn't ever on Russia's borders until the last 2 decades. Over the last 2 decades, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, NATO has been, I don't want to say acquiring, but they have been adopting new countries into its membership. So you also have to address, and I'm not saying that NATO should pull back, but you have to take their complaints seriously, because otherwise you would never get to the heart of the conflict. Russia invaded Ukraine because of their complaints. And if you don't address that, the cause of the conflict, then you may never solve the conflict. So I think it's very important to hear both sides of the story. But yeah, it's also very, you also, as a Stoic, can't deny the facts. Russia invaded Ukraine, and they're the person who's at fault here. Adi.
I raised a hand. Oh, sorry. I just found an article which is very, I mean, I don't like the title, but it's kind of, I mean, I'm just reading it. Is it, I would like actually people to have, let me know what they think about it. I mean, I don't think it's a propaganda article. I'm just trying to find who is the author of this article, because it could be, but is it really like a viewpoint of the situation, or is it something written by someone from?
It just looks like a blog written by somebody who's interested in Stoicism and wanted to write about the conflict.
Yeah,
I think it's just his or her opinion. I think it's their opinion. Yeah. That's all. But it's very nice that you shared it, because I've been having problems find things written that are about how to understand this conflict through or how to understand war in general through a Stoic lens. And this is the first time, like, the only articles I've seen on Stoicism and war, for example, Donald Robertson, who's a famous psychotherapist who talks about Stoicism in lectures and conferences. He wrote a couple of good articles, but not really about war. So he wrote, for example, about how Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, we don't have his work. His work is all lost, but he purportedly wrote a book on anarchism, this utopia of people living in harmony with one another. It was an early kind of anarchism, a utopiast anarchism. And then he also had another article about how a lot of the Stoic philosophers and Greek philosophers in general were war veterans. So Socrates was a war veteran. He was a general, he used to be. But they only talk about the history of that. They never talk about what the Stoics would say about war, right? So this is the first article I've ever read that it addresses that question, is what would the Stoics think about war? So I'm very happy you shared this with me. with us. I've never even heard of this. I'm actually just reading that. I've never even heard of this blog, Stoic Socialist, and apparently there's a subreddit. Oh no, that's not the subreddit. It's a I thought it was a subreddit, but it's somebody's profile on Reddit called Stoic Socialist. I guess he also he or she, they also blog on Reddit as well. I've never, yeah. Thank you. We can read this a little bit if you want. If you guys are unsure of a comment to make, I can share my screen, and it would be interesting if we can read a little bit of it to understand the conflict through the Stoic lens. Let me do that actually. So let me share this with you. Yeah, okay, there. So, no, that's not it. There it is. So let's start here, because this is where he discusses, he or she, I keep saying he,